Welcome. One of my best friends was telling me how when his daughter was 13, he was freaking out. She was doing terribly in school. She wasn't doing her homework, wasn't turning in her homework, was just getting terrible uh, reports, and teachers were concerned for her. And he just sat her down. He said he was trying to be as conscious as he could in his communication, saying, "Look, I'm concerned for you. What are you going to do in life if you don't learn how to turn in your homework and be successful and learn how to build some resilience? I'm really worried for you." And she gave him this look. He kind of rolled her eyes, gave him this look of like, "You poor, pathetic man." And she said, "Dad, don't worry. I'm going to marry a movie star." Maybe she will. She hasn't yet. This really brings up a really critical part of being awake in life. And it has to do with our relationship with delusion. Delusion is believing things are true when they aren't, or believing things are not true when they are. And much of life, much of this journey of life is about waking up to what's real, waking up to what's true, and then learning how to enthusiastically cooperate with it. So the question becomes, what is true? What is real? How do you manage to stay open to reality? And this is where I find inquiry and the power of questions to be really helpful. Because what it can do when you really focus on what's true, it will begin to heighten your sense of how you're perceiving. So what I'd like to talk about and share with you is around the lenses of perception, of the different ways that you can perceive reality, believing each one of these is real. I'd like to talk about a protocol for deconstructing beliefs, because we build these castles and these incredible constructions of reality based on our beliefs. And there's a possibility that what you're believing isn't true. Also, I'd like to talk a little bit about dismantling the sense of who it is that's perceiving reality, and how do we go about kind of deconstructing our personal sense of reality that may have nothing to do with reality. Vipassana meditation was once described really well as cultivating piercing insights into the nature of reality. It's a daunting thing, it's a scary thing sometimes, and it's a deeply freeing thing. So you may be familiar with the chakras. These are and again, there are many different ways of exploring these energy centers in the body, but in classical yoga, or some form of classical yoga, some people say, no, that's not classical, this is classical. But one particular filter are these different 7 energy centers, and they represent different levels of perception. So imagine you're going to a party. Now, in this mix of party, and I don't know about you, but since COVID, I've become more and more agoraphobic. I'm just really used to being alone. So when I go into any mix of people, one level of perception is we can relate to sort of the root chakra, which is at the base of the spine, which is around feeling safe. So you might be in this mix of humanity, and you might be feeling, who here might kill me? Does anyone here have a handgun? Who looks unreliable? So this is one filter of perspective, where you're scanning for danger. You're scanning for what might harm you in some way. Some people live in a chronic state of not feeling safe, not feeling physically safe. Also, the next level, if we kind of move up the chakra centers, a little bit higher in the center of the body, you might be asking yourself as you scan, well, who here might be the optimal partner for procreation? There's the binaural scan, like who's makeable, who's not makeable. This is the center that has to do with sort of sexual expression. Like how can I keep my species going here? Who's going to be the right partner? Moving up to the next chakra, this has to do with power. And here you might be scanning around this group of people thinking, who's got the most power here? Who here could further my quest for domination? Who could move my career forward? Who do I need to protect myself from? Who do I feel more powerful than here? And again, it's very easy to kind of live in this place of just sensing, who do I need to avoid? Who's going to try to dominate me, and who can I dominate? These first three centers are very much around safety, around procreation, and about expressing your will in the world. Moving up into kind of the fourth energy center, who do I feel a heart connection with? Who do I resonate with? Who here is part of my tribe? And here you can begin to feel more of a sense of connectedness. Kind of moving up, and this has to do with expression. Is there anyone here I can feel undefended enough with, where I can communicate with a sense of ease and a sense of truth? Who can I freely speak with here that resonates here? Who's in my vibrational tribe, if you will? Kind of moving up, as you're kind of scanning the crowd, sensing, well, is there anyone here who's guided by some kind of inner light? Is there someone here who just seems like they're like somehow they have a sense of connection to presence, and they're kind of bringing that into their life. And this is this sort of level of seeing how each person, in to the best of their ability, is really attuning to their own path, to their life purpose, and manifesting it. We're all trying to do this. We're all trying to kind of follow and align with our destiny, but some people are maybe a little more adept at that or not. Kind of scanning up through these energy centers, or we can think of it as like kind of the crown chakra. This is a sense of connectedness, where we perceive that we're all individual expressions of the same energy. Like Thich Nhat Hanh speaks of how when you're in a garden, they're all these different expressions of the same life force. So imagine being at this party where you're just seeing the beauty of each person as an individual expression of this kind of divine light. I find there's something really cool about that way of perceiving. So when you're in a crowd, what do you see? Do you see just people who are kind of in your way as you're on your way somewhere? Do you see a sense of all these beings trying to do the best they can? All these individual expressions of collective light? Well, there's this phrase that says when a pickpocket sees a saint, all he sees are the pockets. And you know what it's like if you're ever with a high-pressure salesman. They don't see you. All they see is the potential sale. And you're just in the way of them getting what they want out of you. And I'd say that for me, like when I'm in a group of people, there's eventually some kind of evolution. I'm very aware of how, and I've talked about this before, but when I had a celibacy vow for quite a few years, it revealed to me how much I was sort of in that second level of the binaural scanning, of who here could be a potential procreation partner. And it was so embarrassing just to see how I would sort of scan, and either there was potential or there were those who should just be discarded. Eventually, I began to see how I was stuck in that filter. That all I was seeing was ways that I could sort of express myself sexually. Super embarrassing. But I also began to see how when I could work with that, it's almost like I could move my awareness up to a higher center. One of my teachers, and this really kind of only works for heterosexuals, said, see the opposite sex. Actually, let me back up. He said when he was kind of speaking to the male population, to the brothers in the ashram, he said, see the opposite sex as your sister or your mother. And that was no fun, but it was really, really helpful, because it shifted me from that sense of just that sort of very, very basic human sense of connection, domination from that sort of sexual level to sensing something different, being able to move it up to a higher center, to see the interconnectedness among us. Remembering our interconnectedness, kind of remembering that we're all these different expressions of the same thing, the same energy, is incredibly powerful, because it moves from that sense of who's going to kill me, which is a relevant question, and it kind of moves us up through how do I express myself sexually, to how do I impose my will on the world, to how are we connected through the heart? How do we speak truth? How do we perceive our sense of purpose in life, to that sense of inner being, as Thich Nhat Hanh calls it? And as I was thinking about this, I had this memory. It was such a cool Zen moment. I was in college, and I had a pickup truck in college, which I bought from my brother for $250, which is the most I'd ever spent on a car. It's a 1964 Chevy Fleetside pickup. If you're familiar with that, it was a straight six with 3 on the tree. The shifter was on the column, 3-speed. And it only had an AM radio. And the strongest signal that I could get on my radio was this country radio station. And I had this moment at a stoplight, and I'm waiting for the light to change. I looked in the rear view mirror, and behind me was this old woman. And I remember she was a fleshy woman. I could only see her face in the rear view mirror. But I was listening to some country song, and then I noticed that she was mouthing the lyrics of that song. It was just this incredible moment of that she and I were listening to the same song. And then as she was sort of singing the song that I was listening to, as I was watching her lips move, it was this really beautiful moment of how we're all listening to the same frequency. How we express it, of course, is unique, but that same frequency of a present moment awareness. So I find this perception of the chakras, or these energy centers, I just find it to be a really interesting lens through how we can not only perceive internally, but how we view life. And it's very aligned, in my mind at least, with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Once we have that sense of physical safety, then we naturally have a desire for expression. And the next level of expression is sort of that sexual expression. Kind of when that's handled, then we have kind of the sexual energy is also, it's creative energy. It's energy that wants to move, it wants to express itself. And then that comes up into expressing ourselves through our will, hopefully through right livelihood, which opens the heart, which opens our capacity to speak, which opens our capacity to align with our purpose. which opens into presence. So I'd be delighted to talk more about these energy centers and their expression, how to meditate with them if there's interest. But what it points to in my mind is that on one hand, you are this pure awareness, that you are this sort of unconditioned presence. And that unconditioned presence it's open, it's spacious, it's timeless. It has this quality, it's beyond judgment, it's beyond preferences. It's this deep, deep sense of being. We have access to that. But within that framework of presence, we also have these energies that are focused on being safe, staying alive, expressing yourself in the world, keeping the species going, around power, expression, connection. And so as we pay attention, as we practice self-observation without judgment, we can notice the different levels of how these energies express. And I always find it really, really interesting to sort of see this chain of manifestation at the most fundamental level of who you are. Just pure energy. The energy is not good, it's not bad, it's life force, it's chi, it's ki, it's Holy Spirit, it's prana. That energy inside of you is then interpreted as a feeling tone. A feeling tone, 3 feeling tones: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. There's the energy that you like, the energy you don't like, and the energy that really has no particular impression. Without even being aware of it, you will then interpret that feeling tone, and it'll show up as thoughts. Oh my God, here comes that ache in my shoulder again. Why did I try to lift that box the other day? And then on and on and on. Or, oh my God, here's this feeling of relaxation. Oh, why don't I do this more? Etc., etc. So, out of the thoughts are formed beliefs. And beliefs are thoughts that you've simply thought 1,000 times that calcified and hardened into a belief. If you're not aware of your beliefs, they form your habits. And if you're not aware of your habits, they form your character. And if you're not aware of your character and your character structure, that's your destiny. So, of course, in mindfulness, you're guided back to the here and now, back to this energetic sense of presence. And what happens when you can do this, and sometimes you can just be aware of present moment awareness before the thoughts proliferate. The idea here is that when the mind kind of goes off into its commentary and its narrative and those 50,000 or 60,000 habitual thoughts that we think every day, when we disassociate from the thoughts, we come back to the energetic sense of here and now. You stop the proliferation of thinking and you re-arrive, even if just for a moment. And every moment of re-arriving is this fresh experience of here and now. And it can create dramatic shifts. It shifts your nervous system. It shifts all the hormones and neuropeptides in your brain. It shifts how much you believe your thoughts. It sets you up for insight when you can recognize that you don't have to believe every thought, and you can begin to see into the conditioning of that, of who you are. It can strengthen your sense of the witness, the one who is aware. It can give you access sometimes back to that timeless, unbound sense of free awareness. And so quite often, the filter we keep coming back to is here and now, the energetic sense of presence. When you notice a thought, you come back. Of course, as you go deeper into the practice of Vipassana meditation or mindfulness meditation, you then begin to be instructed that, well, actually, you can explore other things too than just here and now. when something is strong, when there is a strong unpleasant sensation, or even a strong pleasant sensation, if there's a strong emotion, you can actually move from the anchor of here and now to, well, what is this? What is this feeling inside? Can I get more familiar with it? And this opens up the power of investigation. And this is one of the beautiful things, one of the beautiful distinctions of mindfulness or vipassana meditation, that it's not just being aware of your breathing. It's not just being aware of your experience of here and now. It's about exploring your relationship to your experience of life. That whenever anything unpleasant arises, whether it be an unpleasant sensation or an unpleasant emotion or a thought that's disturbing, you turn to investigate it. And again, back to the sense of cultivating piercing insights into the nature of reality. You begin to explore your relationship to it. You begin to sense what's holding on. What is the nature of the unpleasantness here? What's the nature of the unsteadiness of mind here? This is a real powerful skill set. And this brings us back to the questions that can set us free. You can actually investigate the nature of the thoughts themselves. And what's so interesting is how when you've got a strong, persistent thought, like I'm really anxious about this meeting I have tomorrow. When you investigate the thought, you realize that the thought is kind of a psychobiological event. That is to say, you have the thought in your mind, but if you investigate it, you'll recognize that that thought actually kind of lives on the inside. That it shows up in your nervous system, and it'll show up as a feeling. And that feeling may be strong, it may be kind of unmistakable. It could be that tightness in your gut, it could be the lump in your throat, it could be that crushing feeling in your chest. Or it might be sort of amorphous and vague, just kind of that sense of low-grade anxiety, kind of like low-grade fever. Or at times it may be really strong and then recede. But when you take the lens of awareness and you begin to investigate, where does that thought live on the inside? How old is that? How old is this feeling? How does this feeling want me to be with it right now? You can begin to unwind these deep-seated inner tensions. Really powerful stuff. Deconstructing kind of the thought process. And as I mentioned earlier, sort of energetic experience, feeling tone, thought, belief, habit, character, and destiny. You can also investigate beliefs. And that's what I'd like to talk about with you a little bit here. Just being aware of my time. Time's flying. There are many different systems that can help you through potent questions to deconstruct beliefs, but probably the most popular in our culture right now is the work of Byron Katie. Beautiful, beautiful work. These essential questions that will guide you into really exploring your relationship to belief. And what I'd like to explore with you is to sort of take you through an example of when I was exploring with someone, and then an opportunity for you to explore how this might be helpful for you. Now, inevitably, our life is just filled with challenges. You know, there's that phrase that life is a sexually transmitted disease that is fatal. That's one lens. But inevitably, when you really pause and pay attention, you'll notice that there are just things that show up that are between you and feeling happy. That's just how life is. We have moments, of course, of beautiful equanimity where there are no complaints, but oftentimes our life is filled with both subtle and gross complaints. And if you pay attention and you begin to slow down, generally what happens in a meditation practice is whatever's undigested it'll find you. It'll just sort of show up on the horizon of your experience. Then it comes closer, then you feel it. So inevitably, when you sit in meditation, something will arise that might want some investigation. So on a meditation retreat, I was doing an interview with someone who encountered an issue. And the issue was basically her lifelong relationship with her older sister. And so to her mind, her sister was pretty much a narcissist. And she had a lifelong relationship with her sister who she felt was never really that interested in her, was never kind to her. And that was painful for her. So the most helpful thing here is to get to the core belief. Like, what are you believing about this situation? And so I asked her, I said, well, so in regard to this lifelong relationship with your sister, what are you believing? I can't repeat what she said, but I'll substitute a word. And she said, my sister is a jerk. So you can imagine the word she may have used, a series of words. It took a little while for her to kind of distill down to get it that simple. My sister is a jerk. So you get a sense of the belief. And this takes time to really drill down, to really get to what the belief is. But this is where she wanted to work with. So then you ask, is it true? And she said, yeah. Yeah, she is a jerk. I said, really? Do you absolutely know that that's true? And she goes, yeah, every evidence in the world points toward my sister is a jerk. Now, this is always an interesting part of the investigation because the mind habitually believes what it thinks. So it takes a little bit of rigor. And I said to her, well, with your permission, I'd like to nail you to the wall here. Do you absolutely know beyond a shadow of a doubt that that belief is true, that your sister is a jerk? And she says, well, I don't absolutely know that, but 99.9% of me is, pretty convinced she's a jerk. That's all you really need here. You need the crack in the wall. So I asked her a series of questions. And they're all kind of a subset of basically, they're a subset of this question of what is it like when you believe that thought? But I asked her, I said, well, how do you react when you believe that thought that your sister's a jerk? How do you react? She said, well, I get angry, but mostly I withdraw. I just go into self-protection. And so I get quiet, I disappear, and then I just foster this sense of, I guess, resentment. So I asked her, well, when you think that thought and you find yourself feeling angry, withdrawing, going into self-protection, what does that feel like inside? Where do you feel that? And what does that feel like? She says, oh. I could tell she was sort of reliving it. And she said, there's just this tightness in my core. I can feel adrenaline because I'm scared. And there's a sense of hypervigilance of how I might get attacked or how I might be harmed. So I feel tight, but I also feel like activated on high alert. So we spent a little bit of time with that, and I asked her this question. Where does your mind go when you think this thought? Okay, where does your mind travel? She said, well, I know that one. She said, my mind just says, I need to get out of here. This is not safe. I don't trust where I am. I just need to get the heck out. So we'll kind of slow down to kind of acknowledge that. And I said, is there is there any kind of addictive behavior that kicks in when you think this thought? She said, oh, yeah. Yeah. She said, I said, I guess I'm a workaholic, but I get busy. And it's kind of like I soothe myself by getting things done. It also kind of helps me that I'm making my own way because I don't have to depend on her. It's pretty powerful. And so then I asked her the next question. I said, when you think that thought, my sister's a jerk, what's the payoff for you? Is there any, what's the benefit for you when you think that thought? It's kind of a long pause. She said, well, I get to be right. I get to stay safe. I don't get brutalized by her. I asked her the next question. I said, what do you not have access to when you believe that thought? And she said, I don't have access to the thought that I'm fundamentally okay. I don't have access to the thought that everything's really, really okay. And that I'm a good person. And some tears with that. And I asked her this question. What happens to your ability to access your inner wisdom when you think that thought? She said, well, when I'm exposed and I feel vulnerable, I have no access to it. For me to access my own wisdom, I've got to pull way, way back before I can begin to tune into it. So then I asked her the next question. Again, these previous questions are kind of a subset of like, what's that like when you believe it? And I invited her to sort of like reconnect with the feeling on the inside of how that thought lives in the nervous system. And then I asked her this question. Who would you be without that thought? And there was a long pause. And her whole posture shifted. Her face softened. And she said, I'd be okay. And she was breathing for a while. And she said, I'd be more than okay. I'd be happy. I could breathe. And so I invited her to be with that. And then there's just this sort of like inner expansion that I got to witness. For her to move into that question of who would I be without that thought, it was like watching years drop away from her face. Such a powerful experience. Now, what happens with these questions of, like, what is the belief? Is it true? Is it really true? What's it like when you believe it? Who are you without that thought? For some people, I know because I've practiced this for many, many years for myself, you get sometimes these momentary sense of like, oh my God, I'm free. And then, of course, that will kind of calcify. But it's helpful to anchor it sometimes. And Byron Katie talks a bit about this as the turnaround. And I asked her, I said, well, what's the opposite belief? And she says, well, my sister is not a jerk. I said, can you give me an example of how she's not a jerk? And she said, well, she's a very loving parent. I see her being really kind to her kids. And she's actually a very loving grandparent. She loves her grandkids, and actually she's a pretty devoted daughter. She's there for my folks. I said, well, so what about this belief, my sister is a jerk, What if you tried that on for yourself? What about the belief I'm a jerk? And she had her eyes closed. She said, yeah, I've been harboring resentment most of my life against her. I speak ill of her whenever I can. I cut her off. I try to punish her by withdrawal. And then I could feel a real tenderness. And I invited her back to that inquiry, who are you without that thought? And again, she reconnected with that spaciousness. So powerful, such powerful questions. Now, I would love to guide you through here, and I'm aware of the time. So we'll take this right up to the end. We might move a little fast, just to give you some warning. But perhaps it can give you kind of a taste. So if you like, you might close your eyes and bring into mind, and you may have already thought of something that's between you and feeling happy, something between you and feeling free. And just take a few moments and sense, what are you believing here? And sense if you can you distill it in one sentence? What are you believing? And you can ask yourself, is it true? If your response is, yeah, that's absolutely true, do you absolutely know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's true? And let's explore these questions that might help you to deconstruct this belief. And I'll be offering the question and just give you a little bit of time to reflect. When you think this thought, when you believe this belief, how do you react? When you believe this is true, where do you feel it on the inside? How does this live in your nervous system? If you could describe it to someone listening in a way they could recreate the same sensations, where do you feel it? Can you find a word or two? When you think this thought, where does your mind go? Where does your mind travel? What does it think? Are there any addictions that kick in when you believe this thought? How do you self-soothe when you think this thought? And what's the payoff? Is there any benefit that you get when you think this thought? And what do you not have access to when you think this thought? What happens to your ability to access inner wisdom when this thought is fully present? And now take a few moments. And again, sense if you can to kind of refresh when you believe this thought is true, to sense what it feels like inside. Just to acknowledge how it lives in your nervous system, and you might inquire, how old is this? How long has this belief been not only operative, but how long has it been a part of part of you. And if you can continue to pay attention to kind of the feeling tone and the felt sense of this, let yourself explore the following question. Who would you be without that thought? Who would you be without that belief? What would that feel like? What would that be like on the inside? You might now just gently deepen your breath. Let your body move and stretch in any way that feels good. You might like to, in your own time, kind of explore what Byron Katie calls the turnaround. Like, what is the opposite thought? What is the opposite belief? And can you find 3 examples? That's kind of a relatively simplistic but a really helpful way. Can you find 3 examples of the opposite thought as a way of kind of grounding the deconstruction and the reconstruction of something new here? These questions can be incredibly, incredibly powerful. These are the questions that can deeply, deeply set you free. At least they certainly have for me. And again, I encourage you to check out Byron Katie's work that goes into great detail. You can watch her facilitating people, but I just wanted to really take this time to share these with you, because these are the tools that allow us to kind of disconnect from all the energy centers that are devoted to the separate self, and help us to connect to our true nature, to access again that sense of who we are. I'd like to end with this beautiful quote attributed to the Buddha. And it has to do with beliefs. And this quote doesn't mess around. This is attributed to the Buddha. Do not believe in anything simply because you have heard it. Do not believe in anything simply because it is spoken and rumored by many. Do not believe in anything simply because it is found written in your religious books. Do not believe in anything merely on the authority of your teachers. Do not believe in traditions because they have been handed down for generations. But after observation and analysis, when you find that anything agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and benefit of one and all, then accept it and live up to it. In order to come into true alignment, it requires an incredible rigor to explore what you're believing. And I hope you found these tools helpful for deconstructing the beliefs that ultimately do not serve you and do not serve all, but might, in fact, open you to new possibilities in your life. Thank you so much. Great to be with you. Many, many blessings, and I look forward to being with you again. Happy trails.